So one of the biggest dominoes of the San Francisco 49ers 2020 offseason has just fallen, with wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders electing to sign a 2-year deal worth up to $19 million with the New Orleans Saints. He had money on the table from other teams. He had money on the table from the San Francisco 49ers, but he chose to sign with the New Orleans Saints over all the other teams that showed interest. I'm not shocked because the 49ers only have so much cap space to play with at this very point in time. But it doesn't mean that I can't be a little salty about it. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders did talk about running it back with the team this coming season. And he even went as far as to speak up in the team's end of season meeting following the Super Bowl loss. And he made an impassioned speech to all of his 49er teammates talking about how important it is to keep this group together. But he follows the money all the way to New Orleans instead of taking a little less off the top to come back here and run it back. Now, I mean, look, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to hold it against somebody if they go and get their money. Go and get your baggie, man. I get it. But when the San Francisco 49ers give up a third-round pick and essentially a fourth-round pick, fifth-round pick swap with the Denver Broncos in that midseason deal last year, it's going to leave a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. We essentially gave up a third-round pick and say a fifth-round pick, however you want to describe it. The Niners did that for a half-season rental and, a Super Bowl game. Because in the playoffs, in those first two games of the playoffs, the divisional round against the Vikings and the NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers, Emmanuel Sanders was a non-factor, as was the rest of the passing game. Now, I know Emmanuel Sanders made a big impact on guys like Deebo Samuel, Kendrick Bourne, and the like. He was that veteran presence. He brought some stability. He brought leadership. He came up big at various points last season. But to hear him talk all that talk that he did just to skate on out the door and go to New Orleans, it's got me a little pissed off. But I mean, there's no real use in crying over spilt milk. I thought that the writing was on the wall the moment the San Francisco 49ers dealt DeForest Buckner to the Indianapolis Colts for the 13th overall selection in the upcoming 2020 NFL Draft. Because you see, this draft is stacked at wide receiver. The Niners had a limited amount of cap space and have used it to re-sign a ton of their own guys, the likes of Eric Armstead, Jimmy Ward, and a host of others. So the writing was on the wall to me the moment that they made that trade and acquired the 13th overall selection in this upcoming draft. Emmanuel Sanders wasn't going to come back on the cheap. The 49ers knew it, so they took precautions, and they got the 13th overall pick in a draft that is quite possibly one of the strongest wide receiver draft classes in recent memory. So, Emmanuel, thank you for your time in the red and gold, but, don't hold it against me if I'm excited when the San Francisco 49ers take it to your New Orleans Saints in the 2020 season. Now, I will say that this almost guarantees that the San Francisco 49ers are going to address the wide receiver position going forward. Yeah, they have a lot of their own guys coming back, but it's a really young core, a really young group. And with those 2 draft picks in the first round and a little bit of cap space to play with, they can make some roster moves here and free up about $10 million in cap space if they cut Marquise Goodwin, cut Tevin Coleman, and cut linebacker Mark Nazacha. If they make those moves, they can free up an additional $10 million to play with in free agency and bring in another veteran wide receiver if they so choose to. And that brings me to a name that's floating out there right now in Cleveland Browns wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. The 49ers were more than interested in acquiring Odell Beckham Jr.'s services last offseason, but elected to hang on to their first-round pick that the New York Giants were asking for that ended up being Nick Bosa. So good on John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan on not making that trade at the time. But it looks like Odell Beckham may possibly be back on the market here this offseason. And the San Francisco 49ers, who now have 2 first-round picks, have plenty of ammunition, whether they want to stock up in the draft with a wide receiver, maybe trade up and get a guy like Jerry Jeudy. We all know that's who Kyle Shanahan would most likely covet. or they can make a move and go get Odell Beckham Jr. from the Cleveland Browns. Whatever the 49ers want to do right now, they have all the ammo in the world, and I expect them to make a move. So Emmanuel Sanders, while we're going to miss you, while you brought a lot to the table and you made a big impact on this team in a short amount of time, thank you for making up our minds for us. The San Francisco 49ers are going to be making some big moves on their wide receiver depth chart coming forward, and I can't wait to see what happens. So, E-Man, hey, do what you're going to do, man. Best of luck in New Orleans, except for when the San Francisco 49ers come to town. And, we'll see you when we see you.